Hello. I've recently seen a number of comments on various platforms that have talked about Warhammer and the evolutions and developments of it in a way that I just can't quite get my head around. There are phrases that regularly come up, things like disrespecting the lore, or breaking immersion, or almost like they've sold out the game to modern trends and new audiences, or that somehow changes can dilute the lore and affect it in a negative way. I wanted to take a moment just to make this video as a sort of unstructured response to that slight uptick in comments that I've seen in various places. There's not loads of these comments, but there are more of them, and they are more consistent in their language than I probably expect to see or would like to see. And I think that was worth having a quick conversation about. So that is what this video is. It's just me responding for a few minutes to those persistent claims that purport to be facts about how this stuff works, but that I completely reject. And not just because of my opinion, but because of objective fact. I'm Jordan, this is Jordan Sorcery, and today I'm talking about how pretty much everything is always breaking the law. If you have never watched my channel, I'm Jordan Sorcery. I like to think of myself as a Warhammer historian and content creator. I make videos about the origins and evolutions of Warhammer and other Games Workshop games, how those things were first created, the influences and inspirations that informed them, and then how they have changed over time, how different editions have introduced new things, have removed other things, and how these games that we love have come to be what they are today. So what are these claims that I keep seeing on different platforms and in response to different videos? Now, I will stress, this is not always, this is not everywhere, but it is more frequent than I am comfortable with, and the language that is used is so consistent. It's exactly the same phrases all the time, and they are spouted in such a way that gives them the weight of fact, and I just don't believe they're facts. They are opinions, and opinions that I believe are drawing the wrong kind of conclusions from these games that we love and the history of them. So what are they? Essentially, there are four claims that come up all the time. One is that changes or new products have somehow disrespected the lore that has come before, that they have diluted the setting in some way, that they have broken the immersion or broken the lore, or that they have chased some particular trend, some new audience, and that is quintessentially selling out and moving away from the core audience and trying to sell more product to new people whilst forsaking the fans who have always been there. So let's start with that first one, disrespecting the lore. Now, I think that this is such an odd way of thinking about things, because you're placing a value judgment onto a change that has happened within a shared universe that exists literally because many writers and many artists and many designers have added and changed things for literally years. The Warhammer worlds that exist today, they have all evolved and changed from where they first started. The earliest editions of the game didn't feature most of what we would recognize today in Warhammer Fantasy or in 40k. They have enormously shifted and changed. The focus has been dragged to brand new areas, to new factions. Things have been forgotten, removed, conflicted, or otherwise reworked to create what we love right now. And that is because every single person who has been paid to work on these products has brought their own artistry, their own creative force. They have developed those worlds into something new by adding to what has come before. And sometimes that's literally a change. Sometimes they are taking something that happened previously and saying, no, it didn't. It happened in this way, or it didn't happen at all. That we have seen loads of examples of this. Take, for instance, in Warhammer Fantasy, the Storm of Chaos that brought the Warhammer world to the brink of collapse at the end of 6th edition. By 8th edition, completely removed. And then the same story, more or less, was retold anew with the end times, and the Warhammer world did end as a result of that event. That is an example of canon changes, completely different canon, completely different stories, parallel worlds. And when you go back further, you can see this again and again and again on a huge scale or on a smaller scale. It's not about respecting or disrespecting the lore and the worlds. It's what these people are being paid to do. They are being paid to explore these settings and to tell new stories in them. And sometimes, to make space for those new stories or new factions or new units, they change things. And that isn't a bad thing. That is the natural progression of these worlds. That's how they grow, how they evolve, and how they stay relevant to new audiences and to old audiences, rather than just being static and just maintaining the status quo in a way that stops being interesting, that stops being fun, that stops telling new stories. And I think that this is where you can bring in that second claim, that changes are diluting the setting. Because in order to create this sort of false claim that there is a setting that can be diluted, that can be changed, chemically changed by the addition of new pieces of lore and products and stories, that is based on a falsehood. That suggests that there is a definitive version of the setting in the first place that can be diluted. But that's just not the case. It really has never been the case. With every single edition, with every single release, with every issue of White Dwarf, with everything that Games Workshop have ever released, the worlds have changed. The only definitive version of any Games Workshop universe is the one immediately after the latest product was launched. And that's because every single product, by necessity, changes the universe in some way. Sometimes that's enormous. It's the creation of a brand new faction. Sometimes it's extremely small. It might just be a new character who didn't previously exist in the universe, now has a miniature, now it has a book and exists. It might literally be a pose that didn't previously exist. We've never seen a Space Marine in that pose before. Well, that's a new addition to the universe. And yes, that might sound ridiculous, but factually, it's the case. It's something that wasn't there before and is there now. So to say that things are diluted by adding new stuff, well, that's just not the case, because the entire universe has only gotten stronger, has only strengthened over time because of all of those additions. Everything that's added, everything that's put into the mix by those people who are paid to work on creating these worlds, it is all just extra elements of the universes that just together combine, they mix together, they create the thing that we love. And sure, there might be particular changes, there might be particular releases, there might be particular factions or stories that I or you or the other person down the line don't love as much as we love everything else. We might even not like it. We might hate it. We might think that is not what I want to see in this universe. But that does not mean that it dilutes anything. That does not mean that it's not canon. That does not mean that it's not important to somebody else. It just means that our preferences are not the only ones that are being catered to in this particular moment. Ultimately, I think that that's probably something we all ought to be comfortable with. We're not going to enjoy every single aspect of every single thing in an IP, in a franchise, in a story that we might love. And that's okay. We don't have to. We get to choose what we enjoy. We get to choose how we spend our time and where we want to invest our energy. And with a shared universe of this kind of scale, you get to choose which elements are most important to you. You get to build your own headcanon. You get to say, you know what? I'm not interested in that particular turn of events. I'm not going to focus on it. I don't want it to be part of my particular view or version of that world. Sure, officially, it might be the case, but when I'm playing, it might not be. For example, when it comes to Chaos Space Marines, I love the idea that they are few and far between, and that every single one of them has existed since the Horus Heresy. They're 10,000 years old, and they are legendary warriors. They are terrifying to behold and to face. The current lore is that there can be many new Chaos Warriors, and they can be created and added to. I prefer it my way. And whilst, if I read a story that happens to be about the modern version, I will have to deal with that. For the most part, it ultimately doesn't matter if I have a different version of that in my head when I'm playing against or with Chaos Space Marines. So what about this idea that something can break the lore or ruin the immersion? Well, when it comes to immersion, that's obviously quite a personal thing. That's tough to be factual about, because someone's level of immersion and what they get immersed in and how, that's going to be very, very personal to each individual and how they engage with the material. But I tend to see this coupled with ideas like Warhammer Fantasy was inspired by real historical regions and real Earth history. And sure, that absolutely is the case. But it's also taking those and completely warping and changing them. It's not set in medieval Europe. The old world is not actually Europe. Sure, lots of elements of it were inspired by medieval Europe and other periods of European history, but they have been completely changed. That inspiration, which is just as valid as the inspiration taken from Tolkien or Michael Moorcock or anyone else, has been built on and adapted and changed to suit Warhammer's world. It has been created in such a way and written in such a way that it serves the stories that Games Workshop and its writers and its designers and its artists that they want to tell in the Warhammer world. So when it comes to breaking the lore, because this didn't exist, how could this thing have existed in European history? Well, no, but it might not matter. And arguing the merits of whether something is historically accurate when it comes to a fantasy setting, I personally think that is an utter waste of time. Now, when it comes to someone's immersion in the world, and sure, I can understand people wanting to have a certain feel. You want it to feel like that period of history. But you need to accept that it's not that period of history. And even if it were, it's a simulation of it. It's not actually that period of history. You're not recreating it. You're building a game based on it. And that, therefore, puts a separation between the fact and the game. The reality will never be completely replicated. But that's not even what the games are trying to do. Warhammer Fantasy is not trying to simulate a period of human history. It is merely saying, I think that's cool. I'm going to explore that through the lens of fantasy. I'm going to add new things. I'm going to explore new things. I'm going to change those things to tell a brand new story in a brand new world. So for it to break the lore, especially when, as discussed, that lore is ever changing, it is not static. I don't really think that these new changes can break anything. Lore is not breakable, it's flexible, and it is eternally changing. And that leads to this final point, that Games Workshop are pursuing new audiences, that they are almost selling out older fans in favour of new buyers, new consumers. And as a result of that, they're chasing certain trends, whether they are political or ideological or social or cultural, whatever they might be. That's something new that's happening that is changing the game, and that's a negative thing. That is the opinion that is positioned as fact. Well, okay, maybe there's a kernel of truth to this, because Games Workshop are always pursuing new markets, they're always pursuing new consumers, that they are a business, and Warhammer is a product. But I think what's forgotten when this comes up is that has always been the case. Warhammer was created as a way to sell more miniatures. D&D players bought miniatures, but they didn't buy very many of them. So Games Workshop, Citadel Miniatures under Brian Ansell, decided to create a rule set that would encourage them to buy as many as possible so they could fight large-scale battles. That got very popular, so Warhammer Fantasy continued to grow and evolve. From that, the Warhammer world then evolved, and then 40k, and so on. All of that is in pursuit of sales, in pursuit of new customers who want to buy new miniatures. Now, Games Workshop themselves, they talk about how they are a miniatures company, and all of the additional stuff, the stories, the animations, the video games, all of that is in service of selling miniatures, because that's what the company is about. Now, sometimes you see that there is a reductive argument on the other side of things that says, well, because it's just created to sell miniatures, because those stories and animations and video games only exist to sell miniatures, that makes them worth less. And I don't think that's the case. I think they are art in their own right. But from a business perspective, that's how Games Workshop see it right now. Regardless of that fact, all of this world, all of these miniatures, all of it is a product. It is all being packaged and sold to buyers. They want us in the hobby. They want us to be part of this world, part of this community. They want us to get joy from it, because then we'll spend some more money on it. And that's just, very natural when it comes to businesses and how they operate and how consumers engage with it. That's all fine. That's all pretty standard fare. But because of that, there can surely be no logical argument that says, in pursuit of new customers, they are selling out old customers, because they're always trying to sell to everybody. Now, whether or not you want to say they're chasing a specific trend because there's more money available from a certain demographic, that might be the case. But that has always been the case. What people again are forgetting is that they were a target market at some point in history, when they were targeted by Games Workshop and they became a consumer of Warhammer. They may no longer be the core target market. That's absolutely fine. And I think that it would be great if folks could accept that that's all okay. Just because we're not being catered to with every product release, with every change, with every story, does not mean that we're no longer part of the community, that we're no longer engaged with a particular game or product or universe, that we're no longer important to the company who produce it. We are as important as we have ever been as part of that world's fans. And that's great. But that doesn't give us total ownership of it. And when things are catering to other people, and they might be changes that we're not that interested in, that's where we need to, I guess, interrogate our own feelings about it. We might not like change. We might look at something that's happening in a universe that we love and say, okay, I'm not as keen on that. That's fine. To have a preference is absolutely fine. But to then try and turn that preference or that dislike for change into a fact, and to say that basically, because I don't like that change, it is diluting the law, it is breaking the law, it is ruining immersion, it is disrespecting the law. To say those things as if they are facts because we don't like a certain change, that is just wrong. I just can't agree with it. I reject it. It's fine to have the opinion that you don't like a certain change, that you're not going to embrace it, that you don't want it to be part of your version of a given world. You can go back and play a previous edition. You can team up with your friends and play the game however you want, with any interpretation of the worlds that you want. But you can't argue that there are factual things like disrespecting the law and breaking the law and ruining immersion and diluting the setting, because they're not facts. And that is what I think we all need to accept. We ought to be having these conversations in a civil way that is just whether or not we like a certain thing. We ought to be approaching it the same way one might approach reviewing movies or comic books and saying, I like this one, but I didn't like this one. I enjoyed this development, but I didn't enjoy that. This character is my favorite. This character's not. All of that's totally fine. It is a personal opinion. And when positioned as a personal opinion and discussed as a personal opinion and a preference, we can have fantastic conversations. We can have a lot of fun about why something is cool or not. When it becomes this false factual conversation that presents these things as if they are facts. That's when we get into difficult, tense, fraught conversations that don't really help anybody. They only fracture communities and worsen the dialogue around these games that we all love. Sure, someone might want to protect their interpretation of a world, but you do that for yourself. You don't get to put that onto everybody else. You don't get to put that onto Games Workshop. You don't get to say, my version of the Warhammer world is the definitive one, because it's not. That is how I feel about it. And I think that if we took on board some of that stuff, if we talked more about opinions and feelings and preferences, and we had a respectful conversation about those, accepting that it's not factual, it is personal, it is opinion, then we might be able to have a more constructive discussion. And obviously, when these things spill out into tension and when things get ratcheted up and then the language gets very incendiary, that's unacceptable. Yes, we're on the internet. People are anonymous. People are willing to say things that they would not, I hope, would not say in real life. But we shouldn't be saying them online either, I don't think. Ultimately, you might say none of this stuff matters. This is all trivial toy soldiers. But it does matter. It matters to me. I'm sure it matters to many of you. We love this stuff. It has informed us. It has helped to build us. It has made us who we are. So it does matter. But that doesn't give us the right to exclude other folks and to put our opinion first and to claim our preferences are fact that ought to be respected by everybody, because that's not how it works and that's not how it should work. Everybody should be able to have their own opinions, have their own preferences, and when they are different, we ought to embrace each other's differences and talk about them in just an engaged, civil, respectful way. So there you go. That is my view on it. I hope that some folks agree with me. I would love to hear from you in the comments below. Again, please keep it respectful. Let's try and have a civil discussion. Anybody who disagrees with this stance, tell me why, and tell me why, please, in a respectful way. That is the only way we'll ever be able to actually hear what each other's saying. Otherwise, we're going to talk past each other, and things are probably going to get worse. So that's where I'm at. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Jordan, and this is Jordan Sorcery.